Good day, I'm David Franklin with knowRX. I'd like to introduce to you today our machine learning platform, Maestro ML. Maestro ML sources patients for clinical trials and increases medication adherence that facilitates significant cost savings and efficiency gains within clinical trials. We need this more now than any other time in our history. Next, please. The problem is that we need diversity within clinical trials. If you're not aware, only 5% of African Americans participate in clinical trials, and 1% of the Latino population participates in clinical trials. By virtue of our platform design, knowRX can help clinical trial sponsors source patients more efficiently. It also helps improve protocol adherence and the quality of final data, which helps all of us. Patient sourcing, retention, and monitoring are among the most significant costs associated with new drug development. By using knowRX, trial organizers gain access to more patients, increase retention rates, improve data quality, and lower development costs. Next slide, please. The problems are systemic and long-standing, both financial, societal, and roadblocks in development. Financial because non-adherence, which starts in clinical trials, results in $350 billion annual healthcare costs a year. Societal because patients, the people we live around and work with, who do not comply with prescribed treatments are much more likely to need repeated physician encounters and hospitalizations. In 2018, I lost my father due to a medication-induced side effect while in an ICU, and that's what prompted me to create knowRX. But from drug development, if we look at it here, it can cause significant problems during clinical trials. This failure to take treatments as directed within protocols will contaminate the data and may lead to false conclusions. Next slide, please. How do we impact clinical trials at knowRX? We work first with patients by empowering them through education, with physicians, with pharmacists, and with advocacy groups. And in doing so, we solve sourcing and adherence problems. knowRX confidently alerts patients and their supportive physicians and care teams about upcoming trials for which patients qualify. Because of our platform is designed to maximize drug adherence, populations who enter trials while using knowRX are preconditioned to use this tool and are more successful in the trials and giving them better outcomes and reducing time to market. This allows them to adhere to a medication schedule, capture the responses and complaints, and remain protocol compliant as the trial progresses. Next slide, please. Where is the problem? The problem is a lack of trust within the healthcare system by the minority population. Did you know that 70% of physicians who engage the minority population does not educate them or give them an opportunity to participate in medical research? And on average, 54% of the same community does not trust their providers. We see this on the news. Minorities are impacted more adversely by COVID-19, 3 to 5 times more than their Caucasian counterparts. Whether it's morbidity or mortality, our citizens are being impacted each and every day. Medication non-adherence is specifically with COVID vaccines coming out. This is why this is important. We can reduce or remove repeat hospitalization costs, lost wages, lost productivity, and inefficient use of medical resources. Next slide. So who is our market? To start with, it's clinical trials that support the FDA approval of new drugs. The median average of a clinical trial is $19 million, and it will continue to grow. But more importantly is understanding who the participants are in these clinical trials. There are roughly 122 million people of color within the United States. And the same population, this race, ethnic minority groups, are responsible for our nation's growth since 2000. Each doctor visits, or 80% of doctor visits, results in a prescription being ordered. And in 2019, there were 4.3 billion prescriptions being ordered. And this process through the clinical trial into our daily lives continues to fail. Next slide. Again, I'm David Franklin, U.S. Navy veteran, proud Navy veteran, and a seasoned technologist with over 22 years of experience. My co-founder, Dr. James Powell, has 24 years of clinical research executive experience in the biopharmaceutical industry. Our board team and internal team are very strong, leading from assistant commissioner to the FDA, a four-time CEO of healthcare, a VP of product marketing and business intelligence for Salesforce, and national leaders in both psychiatry and pharmacy. Next slide. So how do we grow? Simply, we generate revenue by selling first platform subscriptions to enterprise customers. Who are they? In the clinical trial space, you have pharma, you have biotech, you have individual clinical investigators and organizations conducting those trials. But more importantly, when we zero down on our population, there's 41.25 million African Americans that we will first address. And as we begin to expand out into the minority community, we will grow our population for these clinical trials. Next, please. Not only does the healthcare system has failed, but our competitors in the space have been failing as well. Medication adherence costs continue to rise, and the low portion of minorities in clinical trials continue. We address this through our philosophy and through our technology of enhancing education value to both physician and patients, and using advocacy groups in partnership with providers. Next slide. Again, I'm David Franklin, and my co-founder and I, we're bootstrap founders since 2019, Capital Efficient. Our current traction is a pilot in Cincinnati with an advocacy group, the Department of Health and the Board of Health. And also this week, we were just named the top 100 startup of the year in the United States. Again, I am David Franklin, and I look forward to your questions. Next slide.
Thank you, David. Now we're going to turn to the Q&A portion of the presentation, and I'm going to give the honors to Matt Abrams to start with the first question for David.
All right, David, thank you much and appreciate it. Obviously a big space. Really the question I have is more on the focus area. So you talked quite a bit about clinical trial pieces and medical adherence. And yes, the medical adherence portion goes with clinical trials, but as you think about the go-to-market approach, walk us through really tackling just the medical adherence area and space and problem area versus clinical trials.
So yes, thank you for the question, Matt. They are coupled together. If you decouple them initially on the clinical trial piece, it's engagement, recruitment, and navigation. On the medical adherence standpoint, it's more focused on behavioral change of the patient population themselves, not on the industry side, but how do we keep the patient engaged and monitor them throughout the adherence of not only the COVID vaccine, but any other drugs they may be on. So we incentivize, we reward them for good behavior of using the application, taking their medication on time to completion. And we also use accountability. So when you do not take your drug or have a side effect or potential side effect, and somebody that's close to you that you designate as accountability partner would be notified, and together in that caregiver environment, you can update the application. So in near real time, not only does your pharmacist know, your physician knows, and potentially if you're in a trial, the trial's care coordinator and the investigator would be notified.
Okay, thanks. I'll hand it off to Ernie or others to ask questions.
We'll stick with alphabetical order. So Ernie, go ahead.
David, thank you. Appreciate the pitch there. And yeah, it's quite a relevant time for you. I have several family members that are J&J and other pharma companies. So appreciate what you guys are trying to do. Could you speak a little bit more about the Maestro platform? I'd like to learn a little bit more, not too technical, but learn about the platform, how users interface with it, and what stage is that? Is it in beta right now? Do you have an MVP and some other details like that?
Correct. We have an MVP, and that's what's going into the pilot in Cincinnati. Maestro ML is a machine learning based off of AWS platform. On the patient side, they have a React Native mobile app that through connected devices, wearable devices, user input, objective data input, send information into the mobile device. Then on the backside, I have 13 years of technology experience, first 500 certified Salesforce. That's why they're on our board. We use Salesforce in a community backend where physicians, pharmacists, investigators, ICD or codes from hospital systems, notes, and all of this come into. So we aggregate all this data in a machine learning model, along with complementary services through nutrition, wellness, holistic. And we digitize, this is amazing, we digitize the pharmacy label that most people throw away. And we put these algorithms against that to identify probability of side effects, but also candidates in the recruitment process for the clinical trials.
Great, thank you.
Hey, David, this is Matt Dunbar. Thanks for working on this problem. Just a couple of more follow-up questions along the same lines. So I understand you're entering a pilot phase, but I guess two questions related to that. Have you been able at this point to gather any data or interact with patients in any way that helps you validate your approach? You mentioned other approaches that are failing, but what makes you believe your approach, have you been able to validate that, and what makes you believe that will work versus others that have failed? And then the second question is, as part of this trial, are you testing in any integrations? It sounds like you're providing this information to numerous players in the ecosystem. So how are they accessing that data, if not through integrations?
Love the question from everybody, and thank you, Matt, here. We have integrations through connected devices. So we have partnerships with Omron, A&D Health, and Nonin. So you got blood pressure, pulse oximeters for one. We also have integrations with DNA aspects. That's more on the consumer side. On the industry side, we can directly integrate because of our platform with practically any EMR, EHR, or a data warehouse from that perspective of the technology front. The patients themselves don't directly interact with the machine learning module. The machine learning module outputs recommendations both to the patient and the physicians or the care coordinators in that regard. In addition to that, part of our go-to-market strategy is through those connected partners, because they have an established a patient base that are high-risk patients, not just for COVID, but diabetes, cardiovascular, pulmonary as such, and they use these devices already. So we're penetrating the market through the patient population that way. On the client side, we offer what's called e-rounds. So think of telehealth, but without the video, to where a patient can subscribe to have physicians, their primary care, really restructuring the importance of primary care in their life to monitor their input on a weekly basis. So that's a small revenue model. The bigger revenue model is with the healthcare institutions or clinical research who monitor and engage on a larger scale, or look at the data analytics for benchmarking of, say, what a drug is doing or what a patient population is doing, not just in their hospital or at large. So they will be able to do that through a community portal. We can grow into other technologies, but right now it's a secure web community portal based off sharing and consent from the patient side to extend this information out. In addition to that, we do have the pilot. We've had numerous field trial tests here in Austin, where I'm at. We've engaged both the patient community and the provider community here and received feedback from physicians and patients and nurses on multiple accords. And our latest traction, we have a very big proposal on the table with Bio as we speak, centered around the COVID vaccine, around the engagement, recruitment, and the navigation of patients for the upcoming COVID vaccines.
Thanks, David.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. That's all the time we have for questions.
Thank you, everyone.